Hello. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you. We're really excited. Here we are at another episode of The Sage. I'm Thomas Yulee. I'm joined with our very special co-host, the Silver Fox himself. Thank you, Robert, for being here.
Good to be here. Rick and Tim, thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah.
This is our first double Sage event.
It is, yes.
Okay. Doubling up on the Sages.
So formally, Rick Ricart, thank you for being here.
It's a privilege to be here.
And you are half owner, the other owner being your wife.
My wife,
of
yes.
Imagine
I think it's
Tours
really
and
probably
Travel.
51-49 if you asked her, but I'll take half. Half is
That's
great.
fair. So Imagine Tours and Travel, open
Yes.
for 21 years now.
Correct.
And you do I suppose from the travel arrangements to where people are going, the outings and excursions, you run the show for people wanting to go to Israel, and you've also expanded. So you're doing lots of Europe trips, river cruises, and much more.
And much more. It's really, the goal is they're biblical tours. That's our bread and butter. That's what we love to do. So, of course, the Holy Land.
Yes.
We love, of course, Israel, Egypt, Jordan. And then you've got the Footsteps of Paul with Greece and Italy and Turkey. And then, of course, Reformation tours, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, things like that. So, and then river cruises and you name it. We do groups to South Africa. We do groups to Spain. You name it.
That's fantastic.
Of course, Scotland and Ireland. And we can just keep going. You name all the countries and we'll do it.
Best form of education, my friends, travel.
We're also honored to have Tim Parker with us.
Hey.
And so your role, you're the global marketing developer.
Yep.
And not only that, but you're also the co-host on Imagine That, which is your show.
It is.
If someone wanted to go, let's say someone watching now is like, well, I'm kind of curious about seeing what kind of trips you offer, and I kind of want to see what you offer and see if I can maybe participate, or maybe they want to check out your show. Tell us about your show a little bit. Tell us about how, if someone wants to get in contact with you guys, how would they do that?
Well, actually, Tim's the real leader on that. So that's
Give us a shameless
his
plug,
idea.
Tim. Let us know how do we find that
Yeah.
trip we've always dreamed of.
Imagine that. We put that together just to get information out, to be hands-on with the passengers and the tour hosts. So we have a couple of different ways that you can, if you're looking to just join a tour, then ultimately you can go to our website. You can go to join a tour, and it'll actually pull down all the different locations that we visit, and you can click on that. It'll bring up all the different tours that are listed for the different months, and you can join a tour that way if you're not part of a church that already has put together a tour. That would be through maybe finding out information through info@ittworld.com. Or calling us at the office, 863-709-9208. I know Rick always tells me to slow down, but trying to get all that information.
No, that's good. ittworld.com.
Yep.
Imagine Tours and Travel.
Yep. So, and then if you're a tour host looking to put those tours together, then you can contact us through sales, and that's sales@ittworld.com. But we work with pastors all over the country to put tours together. In fact, a lot of people are like, "Oh, so how many guys can you work with just right there around your area?" In reality, most of our guys are from Midwest or out west, a lot further away than Florida.
So it's far less local than someone might think.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we mustn't forget the smartest man in the room, our producer, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, producer.
Thank you, Paul.
I just don't know what theme song he chose.
Nah,
So we're
you
doing
never know.
so he gets Queen. We are the champions.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any?
Yeah.
If you had to
any
choose a theme
preferences?
song,
Guns
what
and Roses
Guns
for
N'
sure. Welcome to the Jungle.
Welcome
There you
to
go.
the jungle.
So that would probably be one. And then if I had to say, I Speak Jesus,
yeah. That's
that'd be my next. So
Good
either
call.
one of the two.
Start on a
But
high note and just go with this. So yeah, the one's the excitement, and the other one is peaceful and tranquil.
Get your soul
and-
right.
That's right. I like that.
and if he has, it's got to be a Gaither.
Yeah, Gaither music. I love the vocals, the 4-part harmonies. That's a pretty big deal for me. But I'm pretty eclectic with music. It goes across the board from everything from bluegrass to rock and roll. It's
Fantastic.
yeah.
That's
So.
fantastic.
We'll see what we can find for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're going to have walk-on songs? How we doing
Yeah,
this?
yeah. Entry
Yeah,
songs.
actually,
Actually, an AI version of yourself will walk in.
That's right.
Paul can do anything.
That's true. Hey, so one of the things that we like to do on the show, we have a topic that we talked about beforehand that we want to address. But first, our desire is to get to know you both individually and just to see, because honestly, a lot of people watching, the premise of our show is that we are trying to encourage others to find disciples and to be discipled in their physical community. And there's a lot of great resources. There's people all over their communities who can fill those roles, and so we ask people from our community to join us on a conversation to get to know them and to hear nuggets of wisdom that you guys have gleaned over the years, and that's why I'm excited to have you guys here. It's great.
Well, it's exciting to be here.
So I don't know how we're gonna do this exactly. Maybe
Flip a quarter.
we'll like start with one, go to the other, or maybe just chime in as you feel.
Yeah,
led
feel free to interrupt each other, chime in together.
Then we'll see the real dynamic of the show that you guys have kind of just play
That's
out.
true.
So
That's
it's
true.
gonna be great.
That's why we have them separated right now.
Absolutely.
Sometimes their show gets a little crazy.
It does.
It does get a little
It
crazy.
does. It's true. And we always end up talking about food, so we've got to stop that. And just as a plug, if Zach, who does everything behind the scenes, like you've got Paul here, who does all the behind the scenes, Zach does everything for us with Imagine That, and it's amazing the pieces he put together. The unsung heroes.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
So
That's right. Well, so let me ask you guys this: tell me about growing up. What were some notable world events that are occurring in your life, and then in your personal world, what were some notable things in your early mid-teens, early 20s? What are some things that stick out to you guys?
go for it, Tim.
Well, I grew up just about 15 minutes north of here. So born and raised right here in Lakeland. Grew up in a kind of I guess a lesser privileged area called Eaton Park. You may have heard that. It runs right off of 98 in between here and Cumbie Road.
I spoke there a couple of years ago.
Did you really?
It's now, we have a Hispanic congregation meeting there now.
Oh, that was maybe the First Baptist Church there, or the Baptist Church that shut down. Yeah. No.
Cumbie and Highway 98.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I grew up there, and I think in a pretty amazing time. I think there was a lot of world happenings that I really wasn't aware of back then, but a lot of things happening through. I was born in 1968, so grew up right there at the end of the Vietnam. Well, the Vietnam era was happening right around there. I think desegregation was happening in schools. I think our little elementary school played a big part in that we didn't even recognize, between that and trying to get even the people with handicaps integrated into regular classes. So Oscar J. Pope was a huge part of that happening. And I grew up, not really understanding any of that. So I had friends from what back then would have been both sides of the tracks, and that was true. I mean, you hear that term used today, but it was actually true. All the white people lived on this side of the track, and all the black people lived on the other side of the track. But as kids, we didn't ever even recognize that. So it was kind of a cool, in my opinion, kind of a cool time to grow up. Even so much so that back then, parents were kicking you out of the house, and then you didn't come home till dinner time. So that was I loved growing up during that time. So, how about you, Rick?
I would agree. I mean, we're within a year of each other of when we were born. So I grew up in Miami, born in Miami Beach, grew up in Miami, Miami Lakes, in that area. So that was a pretty exciting time.
Home of the Dolphins.
Home of the Dolphins and the Miami Hurricanes. Can't forget them either. So that was a lot of fun. That was during the whole Schnellenberger era.
Yeah.
And it was neat because we went to school with each other. So that was exciting. Also, the Grahams, which ended up becoming Governor Graham and then Senator Graham and all that other stuff. They were all from that same area. I'm probably just like Tim said. I mean, I don't know necessarily if we knew the different sides of the tracks per se, but it was very interesting growing up in Miami as a whole. It's quite a bit of culture,
Yeah, that's right.
a lot of ethnicity, which is pretty awesome. I'm probably I'm a mutt, so when I think about there's people that have where they came from and their parents and so forth. I am literally a mishmash. So to
You fit
hear,
Miami perfectly.
I do, and so I think that's probably why we fit in, and
Yeah.
and it was great, and I wouldn't change any of that.
Yeah.
Growing up as and the early education years, they were harder. I mean, you got picked on a lot because you were a mishmash. It depends. But as I got later in my years, I really got to embrace it. And honestly, I think it's phenomenal. It gave me a lot of culture and a lot of experience. Got to have a lot of wonderful friends from all over. And like you said, from some that really had very little to some who had very much. And we didn't know the difference. I mean, I think we knew that somebody probably came from a greater financial, background than us. But as kids, I mean, parents that loved us and so forth. I'm unfortunately a product of divorce, so I wouldn't encourage that for anyone by any means. And so that was probably harder. But I had wonderful grandparents and uncles and so forth. So it was pretty amazing.
I'm curious, in those young adult years, who was a key mentor for you, and what made that relationship very special for you?
Maybe discipling, but at the time you never would have known that word or heard of that word
true.
before, right? But there's certain mentors you're looking up to.
Yeah, I think for me, so on different levels, because I didn't grow up in church, so the only church that I really spent in those really up until, and we'll jump into it later, till Joni and I started going to church, really was church for my cousin. Went to church in Highland City. The church is still there. Used to be Mount Olive Free Will Baptist Church, but it's a little Free Will Baptist Church that's right there in Highland City, right across the Fort Fraser Trail. So when she was looking for to make numbers for Vacation Bible School, right?
Pack the pew.
Yeah, I would get
Bring
invited.
anybody that'll come.
Yeah, I would get invited to those kinds of things. So that was, if I looked at somebody who was probably integral in that piece of it that early in my life, it would have been my cousin Tammy, and then her mom and dad, Uncle Larry and Aunt Mary Ann. Uncle Larry had a big change in his life. Never really got a chance to talk to him about it, but I know him and my dad were friends really early and hung out and were, I think, rabble rousers back in the day. And Christ changed Uncle Larry's heart, and that was a big deal. That was something that impacted me, even though he and I never had a conversation. But he was very key in my early learnings of the church. So that would be that piece of it, and that really didn't kick in for me till a lot later in life. Now my grandfather, huge figure in my life. I mean, he him and my dad both work ethic wise, just that, and the importance of family. Still back then, and probably one of the things that I most regret was that level of work that they put in, which kept them away from home a lot. Unfortunately, I learned that piece of it. I think it's great to have a great work ethic, but whenever work becomes more important than your family, that's a problem. So, but my grandfather, Papa was what we call him, and that's what I hope that Paisley calls me. We've got a little granddaughter, so I hope that I'm a Papa. She already calls me Papa, so hopefully I will be that. Then I know Brian Legg wants her to call me PP. For some reason.
Maybe hopefully not that one.
That's one of our pastors. But
Yeah, I'll do stuff like
Let
that.
me ask you
I'll
this.
recommend P-Paul or some name that you're going to not agree with.
Let me ask you this. So tell me more about what you mean by importance of family.
Yeah. So I think men grow up getting taught a wrong way to on how to love their families. I think they get taught that the best way to love their families is to do whatever they can to provide for that family, to work as much as you need to bring in enough funds to be able to raise your kids and hopefully them be able to go off to school, to be able to have enough food, to be able to go on vacations, to be able to do all of these different things. And I think that's, in fact, I know it's wrong. I had a big change in my life back in 2011, 2012, whenever I ended up leaving a job. I didn't have anything to go to. Spent about a year and a half working through all of those details, trying to get to that point where I was leaving a job. Of course, Joni's response during that time was, okay, well, you can leave whenever you have something to go to. So even our wives probably hold on to some of those things as well and go, well, you have to have something to go to. And I remember coming home. I remember one day, I think over the years I had said, okay, God, I give it to you, and I trust your plan in my life. But I always, of course, like all of us do, picked it up and tried to reach out and grab something. And I can remember one morning being completely broken and just saying, okay, it's yours. And I truly did turn it over at that point. And I remember coming home that night and Joni saying, hey, I think you need to turn your notice in. And of course, at that point, I'm backtracking. Well, don't I need to do this and don't I need to do that? But I went in that next day. I turned in my notice, not having anything to go to. And if you listen to my, probably all of my sons, but my middle son, Bryce, is the most, and you know Bryce.
Yeah.
He's probably the most outspoken about it because that summer was spent with them. We spent time going fishing. We spent time going camping. We just spent a lot of time together. And all of those dark to dark days where I was working changed whenever I spent that summer with them. And he'll tell you, I think for all of them, it was the best summer.
That's when they got their
life.
dad.
That's when they got their dad. You're right.
That's
yeah.
special.
So making money, and ultimately I learned during that time frame I could live off of a lot less than what I thought I could.
Funny how that works,
yeah.
huh?
And Rick and I tried to actually, towards the end of that summer, I ended up losing my mom during that time, and that was probably another key thing that I saw as God taking me away from something that I wasn't going to be able to spend time with her for, because we found out about cancer on November 1st of 2012, and November 15th she was gone.
Whoa.
So,
Whoa.
and there was a lot of time for me to have a conversation about Christ, because we grew up as cultural Christians, and she would have always said that she was a Christian, and I would have too, and I had no idea even what that even looked like then. But finally understanding that and realizing that, and me being able to have a conversation with her the Sunday before she passed, and her accepting Christ, of course, changes all of that. So pretty big deal there. But Rick and I tried to grab hold of some stuff right there towards the end of that year. Didn't work out. And then fast forward to, I think it was July of that following year that I came to work for you. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Best decision we made. Yeah, really, truly.
Wow. So let me ask you, and with regard to mentorship, who was a key mentor in your life, whether you knew it or not, and what made that relationship so special for you?
I would say my younger years, definitely my grandfather. He was a quiet giant, just very soft-spoken, but, when he spoke, you listened. And he came from a very tough background. So he immigrated to the U.S., originally from what today would be Belarus, but would have been either Russia, Poland, in that sense. And my grandmother also came across the same time. They were actually on the same boat that came over, and she came from the Ukraine with her sisters, and they actually met. No, it's not the Titanic, but it's a true story, and they did. And he actually was a stowaway, and he came across with his best friend who was also a stowaway.
No kidding.
And so it's a pretty amazing story. And a year later, he ended up finding, which is now my grandmother. So I married her, and the rest is kind of history. But it's pretty amazing, and I think the work ethic. I think what Tim shared is spot on in the sense of you don't want work to be your life. But we as men are taught that you need to strive, you need to do it in your own, you need to work harder, you need to, continue to raise the bar and, dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs. When the reality is, as I think Tim said it best, is spending time with your family and realizing now it definitely makes it easier if you've made some money and you can do certain things. But the reality is, as a child or a young adult, all you want is the time. You don't care if you're playing in the backyard. They're not thinking about, we've got to go on this cruise, or we've got to go on this trip, or we have to pay these, outrageous costs, which is what drives a lot of men to, I got to succeed. I've got to do these things. And I think a lot of it also is the culture of, keeping up with the Joneses. I can't tell you how many men I've talked to where, and I know I've been there as well at different times in my life, they have a certain vehicle and they're more concerned about the thumbs up or somebody saying, great car at the stoplight than they realize that they don't need their approval. Your only real approval is from God. And, I didn't find that out until much later in life.
Yeah.
So I'm growing up. I grew up in I would refer to a non-religious or secular Jewish home. So we did not talk about Jesus. I didn't know who Jesus was until really when I was in high school.
Interesting.
So
So it's interesting what you say, the strive for money. The trick in that is that dollar signs are very easily measurable. You can measure success with dollars very easily, but the false security with it never talks back to you.
No.
And never tells you maybe the way you did that wasn't very good. And whereas a family
Absolutely.
We could probably riff on that a little bit because I think there's a lot of tension in there, and I think that's one of those, the tension between, if I say Judeo-Christian work ethic, and I'd be like, yes, for the love of God, please, yes, you need that, right? But it's this close from being an idol.
Right.
And at some point the Lord's going to go, yeah, you thought I said that, but I really meant was this. So I think that's an area where sage influence comes in. Because if you're a young guy, and I don't vision tons of ladies out there listening to this, but God bless you if you do. When I specifically can relate to men, you've raised sons, I've raised sons. When I think of sons, I think of, man, that's where you need a wise old grandpa.
You really
to
do.
be like, bro, you need to get up early, you need to hustle, you need to work.
Yes.
But also remember why you do it.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting your identity in Christ, you're going to think that that's where your identity comes from. The toys. I mean, for crying out loud, you're a grown man, you still got toys.
Yeah, we had a lot of
That's
toys.
just embarrassing.
Yes.
And it can be a bass boat, it can be your car, it can be your career or whatever. But I was interested, Tim, how the Lord brought you through that moment where you might say, oh, yeah, if the Lord told me to quit this job, I would quit this job. And then sometimes he takes us up on it.
Yeah.
He goes, no, I seriously mean quit your job.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm really glad to hear that your wife was maturing at that same level to where she was encouraging the right thing. Because how easy would it be for a wife out there to go, oh, but honey, but honey, but honey. And that's not the but honey moment. That's the moment of, listen, as long as we're together, we're listening to the Lord, jobs come and go. Mortgages come and go.
Yeah.
Cars definitely come and go.
Without
They don't
a doubt.
last long very at all. But yeah, I think that's part of that sage stuff where it's pretty hard to pick up a book and go, oh, I should have good work ethic. Yep, that's true. You should have a good work ethic. And then you pick up a book and it says, make sure Jesus is first. Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
But then in the day-to-day grind, most Americans, I'm specifically talking to American men, most American men are horrible at reconciling those two truths.
Absolutely.
Because so much identity, so much value. I mean, they really could. They would say, I'm letting my whole family down because I'm not, whatever the magical number is. And then the surveys always prove time and time again, well, how much would you need to be happy? How much would you need to be content? It's always a little bit more than what I got right now. It's like you're never going to get there. And you both alluded to it. Your summer of being able to camp out and hang out, and your reference to time spent, and the fact that the kid actually doesn't need that expensive vacation.
No, they really don't.
By
care.
the way, total side note, this is like free advice. Surveys show that camping is a big deal. You might compare like camping and the kids play with sticks the whole time as opposed to some big thing you thought you had to do.
Sure.
The kids don't remember all that money you spent on something stupid. Yeah. They really don't. Actually, what was more fun was just time.
Yeah.
And that's so how do you make sure that time is how you value? Dollars buy you time. They buy you groceries. But if you don't do the relational investment with the groceries and the time, it's all for naught.
True.
And your kids will grow up and guess what? They'll do the same rat race.
Yeah.
And don't be upset when they get caught in the rat race, because who did they learn it from?
Yeah.
You modeled it for them, right?
Yeah. It's actually interesting you say that. I can think of just last week, for those who don't know, I own a painting company, and that's what I do day to day.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. Let us know.
Although it's moving to Nashville, so we won't shout it out too much.
It's a very good painting company.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you.
It
I
is,
appreciate
actually.
that.
I can say I've actually had you guys paint for us, and you guys exceeded my expectations.
I know several happy people, myself included, that are very happy with your painting work.
I really appreciate
So
that.
we digress. Sorry,
I wasn't even fishing for that, but I'll take it.
You weren't looking, but we gave it.
So last week, Paul, the smartest man in the room, and I, Paul, we worked together. We were at this house, and they have toddlers there. Very curious, social toddlers. And maybe about 100 times, they're asking us or their mom, hey, can I do that? Like, we're painting a wall. Hey, can I do that? It's like, and sometimes in our case, it's like, well, there's probably more of a liability there, so no. But I got to see the mom interact in that. And there are certainly times where it's like, absolutely, you can do that. And as you're saying, there's that participant time role, like simply allowing your kids to participate in what it is that's going on. Like maybe it's like, I'm doing this for my kid, but if you don't let your kid be a part of the process,
Right.
maybe you're actually losing something there.
I painted a house with my sons in the Netherlands. We had to move later because of it. No. But Julie was out of town, and I was like, hey, while she's gone, the three of us, let's paint this living room because she don't like the color. So that was our project. Involving them meant that it took 10 times as long.
Yeah.
But to your point, we still talk about painting that room together.
That's special.
If I did it by myself, I could have done it in maybe less time. But
Well, they're good memories.
and that's right. They're memories, and that is their work ethic. But it's also like this is a gift for mom.
Yep.
Time with my brother, time with my dad.
Yeah.
So that balance of how do you include them? Obviously, I know Rick in particular. He's pretty good at it because his sons work with him and they don't get too annoyed by him. I mean, they still like him.
That's good. That's a good
It
thing.
depends on the day. It definitely depends on the day, or even the hour, or the moment, or the minute.
He's one heck of a straw boss, but once you get to know him, he's all right.
That's good.
Well, it's good. I mean, I got great kids, so
You do have good
it
kids.
is easy. Do they have their moments? Of course, we all do.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I'm honored and privileged to.
Well, that's another good
to have
segue.
a-
I don't know if you want to chase it much, but
Sure.
The work ethic / working with family. I mean, your wife is your co-partner in the endeavor.
28 years.
And kids work alongside him. For me, I always see that's like a pretty rousing endorsement.
Yeah.
When your kids and your spouse are like, yeah, I see that guy a lot, and I still like him.
I would
like
say
him.
probably my wife would say definitely yes. We get along great. I don't know yet with the kids. I think maybe as they get older, they'll probably look at it and say, wow, I didn't realize, just as I worked with my father for 10 years when he had his company in Chicago, those were some of the best days, best memories. As he's gone on to be with the Lord, I look back at that and say to myself, wow,
Yeah.
you don't realize what a gift it was.
That's right.
And what a mentor he was at that time.
At the time, you might not fully appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The
And-
true gauge is later in life when you look back. And like
Absolutely.
you mentioned, like mentors and uncles that were influential.
Sure.
It's like at the time, and I grew up in that same world. I mean, at the time, I didn't talk to adults very much unless they said something to me first. So I agree. Like, I was observing uncles. I didn't have heart-to-heart chats with them very often. But, yeah, a lot of it is like you're just observing. You don't even know all you're learning from them by being around them at the time.
Sure.
But then later in life, you look back and you're like, oh, my gosh,
Incredible.
I got to go get a PhD in how to be a dude. And I didn't realize it at the time. Did I say thank you? I don't know if I did enough, man. I might have been ungrateful some of the time, but you look back later. So I guess that's a shout out to the fact of you got to pour in and invest in people. They may or may not recognize it at the time, especially if it's a father to son relationship.
Absolutely.
At the time, they're probably the son's thinking, I'd do it better. Wait till I run my own company.
There were times that my wife and I actually, because she also worked for my dad, and we never really thought or envisioned that we would end up having our own company afterwards. I thought I would just, for better terminology, probably inherit. He would retire. But then as it went on, we thought, is he ever going to retire?
Right. And I do remember your dad.
Yeah.
He was quite active quite late in life.
He was. So, that was one of those things. You talk about, world events. 9/11 was a huge impact. I think everybody can remember where they were, what was happening, and so forth. Literally, when it comes down to that, I know I was with my wife, and we had our firstborn, which was Zach, and he was about 18, 20 months old, and we were actually at the pyramids in Egypt.
Wow.
When 9/11 happened. And so, I can remember, and I remember people coming up to me who knew who I was because of business and said, oh, Mr. Rick, you've got to come, you got to see this. And literally we left the pyramids, and just maybe about 200 yards away, I know this is crazy, but there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And we, of course, we're 7-8 hours ahead of, and everything was happening. So it was lunchtime, and this started happening at like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And here we are doing a late lunch, and they had, if you remember, those little black and white TVs kind of hung up in the corner of the restaurant, and they had like a 4-inch screen, and it looked like it was a King Kong movie, seeing the planes coming in and hitting the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and all of the things that were going on, and it didn't seem real. But the people there were phenomenal. They were just as much shock as we were, and here we are halfway across the world and realizing, and we still had the rest of our trip still to continue. And from after we left Egypt, we went on to Turkey, which was part of the trip as well. And a lot of people in the news, don't go anywhere, don't draw attention to yourself. We had 3 days in Istanbul, and we went to the Grand Bazaar, and we had a backpack where we put Zach in the back, and as like every tourist, and shopping and the bazaars, and everybody was stopping us and talking to us. And are you Americans? And literally they were saying, we are so sorry.
Right. That's right.
We're so sorry. And it was not a representation of all people.
Yeah.
Okay. These were fundamentalists.
Right.
These were extremists.
Yeah.
And they usually are less than half of 1% of 1% of 1%.
Yeah.
But they get the glory for that 1 minute or 2 minutes.
That's right.
But it made me realize just, again, how important family is.
Right.
And how quickly things can change.
True.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this next question is really intense. So a psychologist friend of mine said this would be a really great idea. And I think it is.
I haven't asked for his credentials yet. So
That's true.
we reference this psychologist all the time. We're not sure if he's, legit. Where does he come up with these things? But Thomas likes the guy's questions, so he'll just throw them at people and see what happens.
That's right. And I'm curious, what is a significant, horrible, bad decision that you've made in your life?
I think Rick needs to go first on this.
Probably not marrying my wife soon enough.
Oh, tell us more.
How long did you know her before you got married?
We dated in college. I was a senior and she was a junior, but I was like a late senior. I had that extra semester to make the extra hours up, and that's when I really met her. She was definitely too smart, too bright for me. There was no doubt. And we dated, and then you graduate and you get a job and you do things. And then I was still holding on to the relationship. And I had to ask myself, am I holding on because I'm holding on with familiarity of college, it's what we know, or am I holding on because I truly love her? And not because of anything she did, because of my own, naivety, stupidity,
Sure.
youth, you name it. The fact that she stuck around is a testament of just what amazing God we serve. But the reality is, we went through a dating period, a courting period, separation, stopped dating for a while, got back together, finally came to my senses, decided to get engaged. Unfortunately, I was horrible. I ended up breaking the engagement off because I kept on asking myself, why am I doing this? Because I love her, or am I doing this because it's what I know? And so many times we hold on to those things. You asked, and we talked earlier in the segment about finances and how men do things. Well, I had been offered a job when I got out of college, which was great. I lost the job immediately because the industry and the world had changed. It was during the first Gulf War. So everybody was being impacted, if you remember back then. For all your youngsters, you don't even remember that there was a Gulf War. So I ended up getting an apartment, was in an apartment for about 6 months, lost my job, ended up having to move back home. You as a man, your psyche is totally out of whack, and you say to yourself, okay, you talked about work ethic, so I get a job as a waiter, and I start, in the restaurant, and I'm working every shift I can, picking up shifts, doing everything I can to make money. Nobody was hiring. I'm living back in the converted garage into my bedroom because my parents had already done something with my room at the house because I'd moved out. And, we're always chasing the dollar. You're thinking that you have to do something. So I thought to myself, why would she even want to have anything to do with me? I can't even financially have a real paying job. So I was going through all of those ideas of we set these unrealistic benchmarks. And I think we allow society to also dictate you need to do these things. And then you realize, okay, this isn't what it is. So finally I get another job, and I end up moving to Georgia. I have this job. I'll tell you, here I am, college degree, finance or marketing, finance, all of that, minor in criminology, and I am a manager for a Checkers. Okay, some of the best experience I could have had. And people would say, "No, I was flipping burgers at times when somebody didn't show up, because when you're a manager, you do whatever it takes." I did ordering. I learned how to do things. All the hiring, and before I knew it, they were having me open up one Checkers after another Checkers, hiring, doing everything, and I did that. And my father, again, mentor, says to me, "Okay, are you tired of making everybody else money and you're working, 18-hour days? Do you want to come and learn the business? I got to rebuild. It's the Gulf War. We specialized in the Middle East. You can imagine." So I had an opportunity to go to Chicago. And during that, of course, I break it off with Amy and thinking I've got to figure out how to make it. How can I even be a husband if I can't even rub two nickels together? And so my arrogance, my pride, everything. And then I go and I work for my dad coming in. And as I started the very first year, they gave me a list of potential clients. And as I'm making phone calls, back then it was cold calls. And for most of you watching, the younger people, the internet had just started. And we were actually really using computers and so forth.
Back in the day when cold calls worked.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Was it? It wasn't just Word, but it was Word, WP, okay, and all of that. But the list that I had that I was calling, almost 3/4 of them were probably deceased. And I remember going to my dad and saying, "Do you not like me?" And he says, "Well, I just wanted to see if you were really going to put in the work and time and how serious you were." Finally, as I started realizing that he was trying to teach me, and I didn't mind the work ethic, and I was usually the first one in, and usually my father and I were the last ones out. I realized how much I really missed and loved Amy, and it had nothing to do with money. But it was during that time in Georgia that I actually proposed to her. And I didn't have any money to my name. And I don't recommend this, but I totally financed the ring that I bought her. And,
Not a Dave Ramsey plug.
Dave Ramsey would have been very upset with me. And it's very interesting. And, I can say now, 32 years later,
Yeah.
What a blessing. But the things you go through and you learn, it's amazing. You know, and I let a lot of my pride get in the way.
And
So you looking back, you would say, obviously the Lord has worked it all out,
Oh, he
but
has.
that doesn't cover our stupidity and still being able to say, I wish I'd have done it differently.
Absolutely.
So you would say that you wish you'd have bucked up once you knew she was exactly who she pretended to be.
Correct.
You should have said, I need to man up and marry this woman.
Without a doubt. And it goes to what you're saying and what Tim said, too. And I interrupt you. Sorry.
No. The whole money myth seems like was floating in
That
your
was
head.
in my thing. And like you were talking about, you know, sometimes that summer that you spent with your boys and it wasn't about money. The one thing that Amy said to me is, I don't care if you had any money. And that's when I realized, okay,
Yeah,
this is real.
that's right.
And she was making more money than I was our first year of marriage.
Yeah.
And as a man, that's very hard to swallow. Nowadays, I think a lot of men would be like, "Oh, that's great. That's my
Right,
you know, sugar woman."
Yeah,
you know,
and I think it's interesting you bring up that point. And I want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
So like
He'll do that.
people in my generation don't care about money quite as much. But one thing that hearing your story, if I'm putting my feet in the shoes of another, I might say, well, it sounded like you needed that time to sort out if you really wanted to marry her.
I did.
So it wasn't a mistake.
No.
And so what made it so bad that you waited that long?
Well, I mean, she's my best friend.
You lost time with her.
I lost time with her.
Yeah.
You know what? Somebody quoted to me that Harry Met Sally, not recommending it, just an awesome movie with certain quotes. And he says something, he has a line like, once you know who you want to spend the rest of your life with, you might as well go ahead and start the rest of your life sooner rather than later. So, yeah, it's just basically lost time.
It was.
And then, so, yeah, definitely don't confuse God's divine providence with working it all out with, I still would like to go on record as saying, I should have done it different. And then obviously, because in the end, did she wait till you were a multimillionaire before she was willing to marry you? No. Because she, on the other hand, is thinking the whole time, like, really? Like, you think I'm that shallow? Like, I'm going to base this whole thing on whether you got the gold or not?
Right.
And so
She never cared.
she didn't care in the end. She didn't care, which is further verification, in case you didn't need it before, that she was the right one.
She was the right
She
one.
wasn't looking for that.
No, without a shadow of a doubt.
But yeah, I get where you're saying, like, yeah, they don't care as much, but that's almost, they almost err in the other direction, right?
That's right. I'm not sure. I mean, my generation is more in the I'm not sure camp, and the money might be a very peripheral issue. But if there's any uncertainty, let's just live together, you know. And why do we have to commit to this long-term thing? Let's just take it day by day, you know.
Well, we knew we couldn't live together. We knew we had to get married.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for us. And I think that was part of, we knew that if we wanted God to bless our marriage, we knew that we needed to do some things right. And we didn't always do everything right. But it was important to put, at that point, God first.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal.
Now, commitment and love were kind of interwoven, and so you're like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like,
Nope, absolutely.
to say you love but don't commit, you just totally changed the word love on me. like,
No, it's
let's not, you know. So yeah, I definitely get your, you know, in the devil's
Sure.
advocate. That's where a lot of people's headspace is. But it would go back to, well, once you know you're in love, love wants to commit. Love doesn't go, I think I'll hold back and let my options play out. Almost by definition, interwoven with the concept of love is, you're my child. You're my responsibility. I commit to you. I will protect you. I will take care of you. You are my spouse. We together will commit. Or in church life, we were talking before about, what do you do when you get burnt by a church?
Sure.
There's something interwoven with, yeah, I know it hurts, and I know that people can be a real pain in the neck sometimes, but man, if you run away from commitment, you're missing out on so much. So I do, yeah, probably most people, when younger generation, when they hear the word commitment, they think I'm locked in, I'm losing options. And I would say, no, you're losing all your options because you haven't committed.
Yeah.
So you miss out on so much because you don't say, no, once you know she's the right one, you go all in.
Yes.
You know, so whatever it is you do, you know, do it wholeheartedly, and it's pretty difficult to play the field and be committed at the same time. So
That's true.
you miss out on a lot. You think you're leaving your options open, but actually, you've just shut the door on all the good things the Lord's trying to put together for you.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think in even my own experience, the times where I have been less decisive are the very times where my wife has been not disappointed, but certainly unstable. Like unstable. There's a lack of stability, and not to say like I have to be the man and I get to say all the things, but there are certainly times where there are decisions that do fall to me, and when I'm wavy on it or I hesitate, that does affect how she perceives me, and it does affect our relationship. It can often make me irritable because I know I'm supposed to make a decision. It can make her feel, very unstable, and that creates a tension and a rift. So
you're living in a town, you've been there for 3 years, and you're still mulling over which church you want to be a part of. I'm like, bro, you just lost 3 years. What are you talking about? You have this job offer or this job offer, and your wife probably would prefer that you just say clearly, I prayed about it, and as best as possible, I feel like the Lord wants me to go this way. And then she's like, well, I'm just glad you finally made up your mind. I mean, I don't care, but yeah, I would agree. I think that it's an unnerving world to live in when you're led by or in a partnership with people who kind of waffle a lot. You're like, or let's say it's post 9/11 and you're about to launch an enterprise which is very dependent upon world travel. Just a hypothetical scenario, not that real people face these things. But you're like, you know what? We may be wrong and I might fail spectacularly, but I have a conviction, we got to go for it.
That's what
and then I think your spouse and everybody else around you, your team, goes, bro, I appreciate that. You said we're going to go for it. Because what I don't want to do is work for a boss man who's like, I don't know, today I kind of think this. I don't know. And you're like, just make up your mind. Right? So, yeah, there's something about that.
That's fair.
I think in any partnership, certainly in a marriage, our spouses probably would prefer that as just state what you really think you're supposed to do and then mean what you say and try to stick with it.
Yeah.
And let the chips fall where they may. It's okay to make mistakes.
That's true. That's actually very
I
comforting.
wonder if Tim's had enough time to consider, does he want to share? And if you don't want to share, that's totally cool. You're off the hook. But anything come to mind when you think, yeah, I wish I hadn't have done that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, multiple things come to mind, so I don't think it's ever a question of I don't want to share. It's which one do I share that I feel like is going to be
constructive or helpful.
really impactful for someone. So, we're products of our past, or we can be products of our past, and I think we have to be willing to not say, okay, well, I was just brought up that way, or that's the way that I learned it, so that's the way that I'm going to do it. We have to be open and willing to make those changes, or let God make those changes in our lives. Is probably a more accurate way to say that. So ultimately, I think a couple of things I think back to. We as men, we've talked about that, and not walking into that leadership role as a whole. It was okay. Well, I've walked into it financially, and I'm doing it in this work life. And for a long time, Joni led our family through a lot of probably long days and late nights, and dragging me to church whenever I wanted to stay home and watch a Bucks game, or a lot of different things there. I think early in our marriage, the whole lie thing, that was something whenever Joni and I first came into. Whenever we first got married, she said, "Hey, just don't lie to me. Just don't ever tell me a lie." And we started out a lot of that with, young. I started dipping snuff pretty early in life. That grabbed a hold of me. My grandfather chewed tobacco, and he always kind of lied to my grandmother about, him stopping. And I knew he hadn't stopped, and I called her Bing On. Bing On knew that he hadn't stopped, and I looked at it and went, well, he still loves her. So whenever I entered into the marriage, with Joni, and she really didn't want me to be dipping snuff, and I just looked back at that, and I went, oh, well, Papa loved Bing On. He lied to her about that. I still love Joni, and those, and it was less about that, and it was more about the lie.
That's right.
Yeah, it was.
By the way, we could care less if you do snuff or not, but
Yeah. Well,
lying to your
I'd rather
spouse
you not
about
do
it is
that.
totally uncool.
I'd rather you not do snuff.
Yeah,
but,
better not than do, but
but
the lying
but
is
the
where
lying,
it really gets
the
you in
lying
trouble.
was the root of that, right?
Yeah.
It was something that took. I would constantly say I'd stopped and would hide it from her. So I think that would say was for her. I think was the most painful time of our marriage was all the back and forth line that was happening back there.
Because then it opens up that fissure of, well, what else are you going to decide is okay to?
Sure.
As long as she don't find out. That's
Yeah.
that's what we mean when we say lie.
Yeah.
Well,
So
could be
and-
financial decisions I'm making. It could be where does it stop?
Yeah, and it, I ultimately it impacted my kids, and it come to a head at one point whenever Bryce was fairly young, and he went to Joni and was like, "Hey, what's that stuff that Dad's always putting in his lip?" And I'm like, "Oh wow!" So you're called out at that point. You're caught at that point. And I can remember
Bryce the prophet has come down.
Yeah, but that was one of those moments where you had to go, okay, which way am I going to go here? Am I going to continue to do the lie, or am I going to walk fully into honoring my marriage, and be truthful and not have this, you live this. When you live that lie, it's like a weight sitting on your chest forever. And Bryce talks a little bit about that in some of the stuff in his life as well. But you're constantly waiting for the world to collapse, right? You're waiting for that lie to come out. And there's a book that we read one time. It was The Heart of a Warrior, and it was
Great book.
Yeah, it was written by Michael Thompson, and his piece is you should understand that you are a son of the Most High King, and you have to understand that you're a child that's been adopted into His family first before you can be the warrior. And when you begin to understand that, you begin to understand that there's if you live your life focused on God, then there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear, and there's nothing to prove. And when there's nothing to hide, then you don't fear that lie coming out, that your world collapsing, and that's you spend all this time building this bridge, and then you do that. You go back to dipping snuff or whatever that is. I mean, it could be any number of
Whatever
things.
the lie is.
Yeah, and all it takes is you've pulled that stick out of the bridge, and now the whole bridge is collapsed, and now you got to start all the way back over again. So nothing to hide, nothing to fear, and at that point you truly have nothing to prove because you're living within His will, right? So, but that was the beginning of that. We were talking back to our spouses and what they look for. I think in us, is it money? Is it fame? Is it popularity? What is it? And I think it's for us to lead. It's for us to be and to lead in a godly way, because people lead all the time, but not within the confines of what God has set forth for us. And even whenever our spouses want that so much, I think the curse comes back into play sometimes, right? Where, hey, you finally start leading, and they're like, no. I still want that. And that's another thing that you have to work out as you begin to lead in your family the way that you're supposed to be leading. Your wife has to probably relinquish some of that control that you've not allowed her to have, but surrendered to her because we weren't leading.
That's right.
So I think it's important to understand that there's going to be a learning curve even in that whenever you finally do begin to lead, and that didn't happen to me till I was, I'm going to say, until I was 35 or something like that for me.
Yeah, we can't get upset with her if she doesn't say, okay, here's the keys, and I'll never ask you a question. It's like, well, wait, we got to relearn this thing because you weren't around for all those times, and now all of a sudden today you're saying you're going to be there, and you're saying I can back off.
Yeah.
But history shows me that maybe that's not totally true.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's not, you got to make sure you don't take that as like a slight and you feel offended. It's like, you know what, honey? It's true because I haven't earned your trust. Trust is earned, right? And trust doesn't mind being verified. It's okay for you to question and ask me and say,
healthy.
hey, you sure you want this? You say you're going to come back in and get involved. You sure you understand what time the kids got to be at school? Because you said you're going to take them. Do you even know where their school is?
Yeah.
Luckily,
we
this
live
is
right
going to be a
across the
learning
street.
experience. Across the street is easiest.
Yeah, but yeah, it's it's. I think whenever you've walked into that, a lot of guys go, okay, well I've done it for 2 months, and I've done what I was supposed to have been doing, and that's a lot of trust that you've got to earn back, And Tim LaFleur, a guy that has spoken into Robbie Gallaty, some stuff that we use for discipleship, he says this. He says your talk talks and your walk talks. Just make sure that your walk talks louder than your talk talks. So living that out, right? I mean, we still have to use words, but is what we are walking out reflecting what we're saying?
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately it comes down to with our wives is, hey, can I trust him? Has he given me reason not to trust him? And ultimately, that's where Joni and I were. And it took a long time for me to build that trust back up. And so having that trust lost multiple times over the first part of our marriage, that was probably a big deal for me. And it's and me not. I would say the majority of people when they get married, they say the vows that we know, right? And when we say them, I think back to those vows that I said, and I was not thinking about God whenever I said them. I wasn't thinking about what I was promising to do in my marriage with Joni. So that I think is a huge regret for me as well to look back and go, wow, I wish I had been the man that she deserved to marry back then, that I had known God. I knew of God.
Yeah.
I can look back to my early years in school, and I always knew God was there. In fact, I can remember sitting in my line at school in kindergarten, first grade, and praying to God, hey, God, just keep mom and dad safe, family safe until I get home, and then I'll take back over. I can remember doing that. And it's interesting whenever I look back at that, and God was always in my mind, even though he was not a part of my life, and I hadn't really been taught that either. So when you think about that, the scripture says, you have no reason to, you have no justification to not know that there is a God.
That's right.
Whenever you look around you and see all that you see, and I can honestly say that plays out true. I look back and see myself turning towards God whenever we need him, right, and want him to answer a prayer like the genie in the bottle kind of thing, and then going back to living our lives. And I think he's calling us constantly through that. We're just not paying attention to it. And, God's sovereign in all things. And he continues to call us through just the beauty of his creation, through fellowship with other people. If you spend any time in his word, then it's all apparent.
That's right.
So
Romans 1.
Yeah.
You look around, creation says it. If you look at human beings, there's a little part you say, man, they makes me think there's got to be more.
Yeah.
He's here, isn't he?
Yeah. And I love that he's, I guess my greatest regret is that I didn't know him sooner, that I didn't walk into that relationship with him a long time ago, even though my cousin brought me to church and, the little bit of, like I said, cultural Christian, country music Christian, Creasters, whatever you want to call us. That's what we were. Prayed at Christmas and Easter, and that was pretty much it. But those were all times that God was in my mind, and just paying attention to that. That's why I think that's why it's so important for as parents, to raise your child up in the ways of the Lord, and they won't depart from them, right? I mean, it's something that eventually, Bryce talks about it a lot, and Caleb, I have 3 boys, 3 sons, young men, 27 for Caleb, Bryce is 26, and a 21-year-old Zach, and they all have relationships with Christ. I would say that out of everything I've done, that would be the greatest thing, was to share Christ with them, to have walked a walk, hopefully that they could see Christ in me, and want to have that relationship themselves. I think they each would say, hey, we rode Mom and Dad's coattails for a long time. I'm just happy that they made that personal decision for themselves, and that was important for Bryce whenever he went to find a wife, was to find somebody who already loved Jesus. Luckily for Joni was raised in a Christian family. Her dad was a pastor, Church of God pastor. She grew up knowing God, and I think probably ran away just because of that strictness of life, probably. I didn't. So whenever I look back and thank God every day that she said yes whenever I asked her to marry me, because I look at my sons and I go, hey, don't do that. Don't do that, because that's just going to make it even that much tougher on your marriage whenever you have to evangelize your wife.
Yeah.
So look for somebody who loves Jesus already.
At the time, you didn't have enough sense to look for that. The Lord was looking out on your behalf.
Thank you, God.
Yes,
Thank you that you blinded Joni.
But just because you dodged that bullet and it worked out well, you're saying, I don't advise doing that. You might want to you might want to get lined up with people who also are listening to Jesus, because there's no guarantee. Easier. It's going to be a lot easier. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That makes sense.
So
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Rick, when we first talked about having you guys on, I asked you, what's something that you think we should talk about, like a subject that would be a good subject to address? And do you remember what you said?
The grass is greener where you water it.
That's right. Actually, you might
The grass is greener where you water it.
The grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit. Like when you say that, tell me what you mean.
Well, I can tell you in marriage, I can tell you in work, I can tell you in life. There's probably seasons when people are married, and there might be something at, you hear, whether it's in work and you hear other guys and they're looking at other women and they're chasing the idea. Somebody pays attention to them. I think what happens is, if they took the same amount of time and invested in their own marriage versus, let's say for men that have looked at other women, or if they've had an affair, or they've paid attention to maybe the neighbor across the street or something like that, or somebody at work, if they took that same amount of time and invested it, and you can look at things, it's so true. I mean, your own lawn, and it's very simplistic, but if you worried about your own lawn and took care of it, and you weeded it and you nurtured it and you did everything, take that same amount of time and put it into your marriage. I could say you could apply the same thing with, Tim mentioned about cultural Christianity. Yeah. And so you can be a cultural Christian, but you don't necessarily, you have, maybe you're checking the boxes, maybe you're more religious, but you don't have a relationship with Jesus. And so where do you go from that? And so the grass is greener where you invest the time. I'll give you an example. Went to a men's retreat about 12 years ago, and so I would have been 45. And I was a Christian, brought up our kids, led the home, all the things like that. But did I really have a desire or know that I had a relationship with Jesus. And it was that men's retreat where I came back and made me say, where do I want to spend my time? Where do I spend my talents? And what do I have for my treasures? And it made me, when I heard those questions, it made me really evaluate of where am I investing? Am I investing in my family? Am I investing in the Word? Am I really wanting to learn the Word of God? Because how do you have a relationship with Christ if you don't know Him? And it really, it takes work. Just like you want to know your spouse and you take the time and you're ready to invest and do anything when you're in the dating or engagement or early marriage, the honeymoon stage, wouldn't we want to have that same thing with the creator of the universe, the one who loves us and does things? Through some of the conversations that we've had tonight, I think of, do we as parents share with our children that we love them unconditionally and look at it in the same way that Christ loves us, in the sense that it doesn't matter if you get an A or if you get an F, I don't love you more because of how well you performed, or I'm not going to love you more because you did this and love you less if you do that. We may be disappointed because we know that they know better and we want the most for them. But the reality is our love doesn't change for our children. Okay, we love them through everything. And that's really just a glimpse of how much our Heavenly Father loves us. Mm-hmm. And I think if we go through that, I think that's really important. But that goes back to, investing, and that's where the grass is greener.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's good.
Good. I think it's actually a very poignant topic because, let's face it, I don't know if you've been seeing newer movies recently.
Okay.
But usually the main protagonist has very little challenges to overcome. Usually they do something for the first time and they're amazing. They're just the best right up front. And the thing they had to overcome is their confidence. But in terms of developing a skill, that just came naturally. That was there from day one. And it'd be funny. It'd be funny to start listing movies, but I'm just gonna please just trust me. That's the truth. That's the truth with a lot of modern movies.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in my generation feel that, well, if it's not working out really fast, if I'm seeing fast results, or even if I suspect that there's going to be a lot of failure if I continue down this road, that it's not a road worth going down. Yeah. But what I hear you saying is, actually it's funny, my wife and I say this to each other a lot of times in circumstances, like, well, with that attitude, of course you can't expect to succeed. Of course it's not going to go well.
Right.
Can I add to that?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that. I think we're probably seeing today a lot of younger generation. I'm sure it's probably a little bit older too, but the younger generation, they have a job and then they have a side hustle. There's a lot of side hustling today. And a lot of that has to do with technology.
Sure.
A lot of people can do things. And the real question is, where are they spending their time? Because what happens is they spend a little bit here, they spend a little bit there in their investment, and either they have to go all in or they're never going to really succeed at being what they think that they want to do, whatever that measurement or benchmark is. And that's part of, when we started our business, my wife and I, and we took a home equity line just so we had money to be able to start the business. So we didn't have two nickels to rub together other than the home equity that we had. And two things happened. We first said to ourselves, our first year, literally we were a couple of months into business, how do we tithe? That was a really big deal. And I've shared this with you, Tim, and so forth, and you probably heard me, so forgive me. And so my wife and I prayed, and we said, we're both going to write down a figure. And we wrote down a figure of what we were going to tithe. Now, 3 years prior to us starting our business. We had 9/11, so I worked for my father, and then my father suggested don't do anything with travel for 3 years international because nobody was going to do anything. He was spot on. Almost 3 years and a month, I get a call from one of my old clients working for my dad saying, hey, it's time for me to do a trip. And it was totally like, okay, my father was right once again. And so we're in business. We just started. We really can't say that we had any money. And as we were saying about our tithing, we decided for the business that I worked for those 3 years, I worked for a large corporation. And the amount that we tithed during that time when we were making money, we agreed this is what we're going to still tithe. Because first off, it's not our money.
Yeah.
God doesn't need our money. What God wants is your heart. Okay? If you look and you see where you spend your money, you'll actually see where your heart is. And the premise was my wife and I wrote down the exact same figure. And it was the figure of we're going to tithe the same amount of what I had made the year prior. And at that time, we were like, okay, this is what we're going to. My wife was a stay-at-home at the time. We had little ones. So she wasn't working. It was pretty much what I made, and that's what we were doing. I say that because the first year that we were in business, we were in the black.
Wow.
Okay, that's a God thing. That
Yeah.
had nothing to do with us.
Yeah, wow.
Again, God really wanted to hear our hearts, wanted to hear what it was. But besides that, the second part of it was everybody says, so what happens if Imagine doesn't work? What happens if we don't do this? What's your plan B? And I said, well, plan B says refer back to plan A. We burn the bridge behind us. We're not retreating. And, I think it was, what's the Christian band? It says burn the bridges.
Burn the boats.
Burn the boats, King and Country.
King and Country.
And it's very much the same as I'm not going to retreat. And I think a lot of that has to do with still based on the grass is greener where you water it. They all kind of coexist together.
Yeah, that commitment. If the Lord asks me to do something, I got to.
This is what I'm going to do. He didn't tell me to do it haphazardly. He said, I'm going to do this full-heartedly. This is what I'm going to do. If he doesn't want it to succeed, then it won't succeed.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because at the end of the day, the biggest part about when we started, Amy and I, was it wasn't our business. It's never been our business. We love it. We love what we do. It's fun. Do we have headaches and bad days? Of course, like everybody. But the joy that we have of what we do, knowing that we're just people behind the curtain doing the logistics so that when they get to go and experience what they experience, because God always shows up. He's rarely early. He's never late. Okay? And all of a sudden, people's lives are impacted on these trips.
Yeah.
And we feel as, thank you, Lord. It's doing exactly what you told us we're supposed to do. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in all the other things that are distractions.
Right.
And so that's why I say focusing on what's important.
If you chased the grass was greener, you could have talked yourself into switching jobs a bunch of times.
Many a times.
This is a good time to bail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I agree. The grass is greener idea and that burn the bridges, stay invested here. They definitely feed one another, right?
That's all I was trying to say.
So this is you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, when you take that option out, right? When you take that
that's
option
right.
of,
That's right.
then there's no other way to move than to move forward.
If it is God's business, then only God can make me go.
Right.
So it's really not my call.
Yeah.
He told me I had to do it, and until I'm told otherwise, I just got to keep plugging away.
Yeah, and ultimately that works in every area of our life.
That's
where
right.
we go, our marriages. Where
That's
we
right.
go, if we take divorce off the table, right? If we
Correct.
go, this is not ever going to be an option that we ever move towards, and I think that only comes through in a way that you can fully accept that whenever Christ is in your heart. I think whenever you do that, then it makes you being willing to work through everything.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, the generation of today, everything's new, and if it doesn't make you happy in this moment, then go out and grab the next thing that's going to make you happy.
It can often feel that way.
Yeah.
Sure.
So whenever you say, "Hey, this is," when you say, and that burn the boats comes from Cortez, right? Whenever he brought his men over here and a long way from home, and they burnt the boats, and there was no escape. There was only winning. We're either going to die or we're going to win.
That ended all conversations of when and how can we go back. It's like, no, that's not even on the menu.
So, and when you do that in your marriage, you go, hey,
Yeah.
then you just figure out, you seek God, and you figure out how to make things work.
This is open-ended, so whoever feels particularly called to answer the question, I would love to hear your feedback. I feel like maybe listening back just now in my head of our conversation, I feel like perhaps people my age might say, you're not really representing us very well. And honestly, I feel a little bit picked on because here you are talking to these older gentlemen, and they're saying, yeah, just like do what God tells you to do. And hey, you know what? If God wants you to do it, you got to just keep plugging away. It's like, well, it's really convenient. It's really convenient on your end of things to tell me to do that. So I guess my question for you is, how does someone in my shoes not only respond to that, but ultimately, how do we know if something ordained by God that God wants me to do this thing, and how do we know it's God and not just the persuasions of your significant other or your father or your
So hearing
whomever.
from the Lord clearly, a calling or a conviction.
Sure.
Sometimes we throw these expressions around, and then I agree that a lot of people are like, what are you even talking about? What do you mean, like, God told you, said, start, imagine, tours, and travel? You're like, what are you talking about when you say, like, you feel a calling, and you're like, I have to do this. God told me to do this. If they put you on some sort of psychology test, they probably say you're crazy, right? Oh, he hears the voice of God. He's going crazy. But that's a great question. How do you hear that? Because that gets you to that conviction level that these guys have been talking about.
That's right.
Otherwise, you're like, I don't know if I just had an emotional whim and I thought it was God telling me to do something, but turns out maybe it was just me talking in my own head. So it's a good question if we could unpack that.
Yeah, I think it's a question that I don't think there's anyone that probably doesn't have that thought. Was it my own wants, or was it God telling me to do something? And ultimately, I think it goes back to several different things. For me anyway, I think it goes back to is it something that you can affirm in Scripture? So, and how do you do that? Well, you spend time in the Word and you begin to study it and know it. But it also comes from spending time in fellowship with other believers, because I think God confirms things through other people. So, having that conversation with a brother in Christ, having that conversation with your spouse, Joni. That didn't get confirmed from my spouse whenever I wanted to leave that job until Joni confirmed it in me. So I think those are all important things, and it's important to sit down and have a conversation with God, to try to hear Him in all of those things, whether it be in Scripture or whether it be through the confirmation through other believers. So that's my
I appreciate that.
go-to.
You have any thoughts you would like to add?
Oh, I would agree. I mean, definitely be in the Word. Definitely get counsel from other believers, but get counsel from those that you admire and respect and who really have wisdom, people you look up to. And is it a want that you're wanting, or is it a need? And sometimes you're wanting to do things. How is the decision that you're going to decide or make today impact you 5 years from now?
Yeah.
And that goes even with the point of, if you're going to be upset about something today, does it really matter?
Right.
Is this what I'm upset about the same thing going to be 5 years from now, or is this just, momentarily? But when you're making big decisions, life-changing decisions, things like that. It could be even large purchases, really having to decide. I can justify, I can be a justified composer all day long, okay, and spin it every way I want, and I can be great at it. But at the end of the day, is it going to be pleasing to God? Is it going to be a decision that I'm going to be proud of saying, okay, I made a good and wise decision?
Yeah.
And the other question is it going to bless other people? Is there a blessing in this?
Yeah.
And people are like, what do you mean by that? And it could be you're buying a home, or you're buying something. Are you doing it for the right reasons? Is it because you're like, well, we want to be able to host a bunch of small groups, and we want to be able to have people over, and we want to, do fellowship, and we want to do community, and there's different ways to do it. So people can do things, but you have to say to yourself, do you really need that bigger home?
Yeah, true.
And going back to Tim's thing is sometimes the best memories and the best thing are the simplicity.
Yeah.
So
I always love the really short, here's the answer. And what you guys are saying is like, well, it's not really that simple.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why it's not that simple. But if you want to hear from God, get to know his voice. How do you get to know his voice? You're in the scriptures, you're praying, you're talking to him. You're around people who want to be like him also.
absolutely.
And you're also seeking guidance from people who are ahead of you, and you're counseling people who are behind you, and all the way in. So no true answer comes from a little statement that someone says on a podcast.
Yeah.
The true answer is in your relationship with God and your relationship with your community around you. Yeah, is that fair?
Well, yeah, and yeah, if the questions are tell me in 30 seconds or less how to fix my life and make it all beautiful, it's like, I'm sorry, I don't think the Lord has something for you, because the Lord in his beautiful wisdom wants relationship, and he wants to spend time with us, and he wants us to hear, and he wants to communicate back and forth. I like what Rick mentioned there, talking about if your desire is to address the needs of others, because I think there's a lot there. I heard others say, and I liked it, that when you're listening to the Lord, oftentimes what you're supposed to do will be birthed from, you see a need. So I'm just picturing a younger version of Rick, and he's like, you know what, man, if you can get people to the Holy Land, it's like, it can really change your heart. It's really cool to get there. And so you see a need, and it starts from there. And then if somebody else, like his dad, for example, is like, Rick, you could probably be pretty good at this if you applied yourself and you were willing to make the dumb cold calls and just persevere, right?
Right.
So it's
Absolutely.
a combination of, when you start from, the Lord will show you what's not happening out there. And it could be there ain't enough painters out there. That could be part of it. Like, people can't find a decent guy to paint their house.
They can't.
They're getting ripped off left and right, right? Or they're overpriced or whatever.
Yeah,
so
sure.
it starts with that, and then some of what Tim referred to. When you're around fellow believers, then you have good people in your life who are like, hey, man, you're a good painter. I mean, I know you. I mean, we both know the Lord together, and we're both trying to pay attention to Scripture together. But I can also tell you, not all of my friends are good at painting, but you are. So they can kind of confirm when they see gifts and talents and things like that. Whereas otherwise, you're just sort of, shooting in the dark. So, but yeah, when you start with a desire to serve people, the Lord's not going to go, well, sorry, got nothing for you. I mean, he's going to show you. He's going to, but some of those needs you're going to gravitate to, and you're going to be like, man, it almost, dare I say the word, it almost bothers me that nobody's doing enough about meeting that need. And the Lord's like, yes, because you're going to do it. And then, of course, just because you see a need, it doesn't mean it necessarily makes you money. So that's where the whole, when somebody goes, listen, you got a knack for business. You can make it work financially, because not all needs, pay our salaries. There's times when you see a need, you help address it, but you're like, yeah, but that's not my day job. Right. That's just something I do for a brother in Christ. It's not necessarily how I make a living. Sure. But yeah, and some of that calling stuff, you're like, man, that actually is a job. Because when there are needs out there, then the Lord's like, well, trust in my economy. I can have you make a living at it. Yeah. Well, but when your desire is to really serve people, you really want to give them the best trips.
Yep.
the Lord's like, oh, I can honor that.
Well, if you do it with integrity,
That's right.
and I think that's what it is. Is my father's biggest philosophy was under promise, over deliver, and if you do that, you'll have a client for life. Well, the same holds true with anything you do with integrity.
That's right.
It doesn't matter if you're painting, it doesn't matter if you're doing a trip, it doesn't matter whatever it is. If you do it to the utmost, and I think that's really what you're supposed to. You're not cutting corners.
Right, all right.
Makes sense.
And
So-
then there's a host of people that are telling their friends, man, if you go, you got to make sure you go with these guys. You know, it's one of those things where I've used the word trick in our group before, and people think trick's a bad word. But what I mean by that is sometimes it feels like the Lord's asking you to make a sacrifice, to do the right thing, to not cut corners, to serve these people very well when they sign up for a trip. But actually, the tables get turned. And he's like, actually, Robert, Rick, Tim, the reason why I asked you to do that is because I'm really going to bless your socks off, but you just don't know it yet. So he asks us to do sometimes, and it feels hard. It feels like, yeah, but nobody else in this business does it that way. And he's like, trust me on this one. And then you do it, and then sure enough, you realize, well, I don't say you should do it just because it's a great marketing scheme, but it really is. It was God's scheme when he says, I bet if you take really good care of people, I bet they'll tell their friends. I bet they can't stop talking about it with their friends.
Well, isn't that in the Bible where he gives you talents? And what do you do with your talents?
Yeah. Did it get buried or did it get used?
Right.
If you use it, you know, he will use us. So any other thoughts on a hypothetical? If you're trying to figure out what's the Lord calling to me, how do I know if it's the voice of the Lord? Or is it just me coming up with another idea on my own?
Well, I certainly don't want to impose, So
Please impose.
Well, the good news is genuinely, I'm certain that there are folks in the audience, all three of them, and out of the three that listen, one or two of them are like, I really needed to hear that. I'm glad y'all touched on that.
Yeah, it's true.
I think a lot of people get stuck at that point, especially in your young, early adult life, because that's when you're making certain decisions. It's like, man, we were at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And if you made the wrong turn, it's got a long time to be wrong.
It is funny you say all that because I was actually just telling my wife, like, because there are a couple of potential job offerings that I have access to because basically the painting company, it remains and it stays in Lakeland. We're filling the roles and it's going to work out very, very nicely. And I'll have a more passive role. I'll be doing back-end stuff that I can do basically whenever. So I have a lot of free time, and what I know, me and free time don't mix. So
we got to get you busy.
I gotta
with
do
a
something.
good godly purpose.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and so there's a lot of there are a number of low-level positions. That's one opportunity is driving around in a car full of cameras looking for potholes in the state of Tennessee. It's like, that's kind of a novel job, but is that really using my talents? It's like, no, it's cool because it's kind of novel, but is that really using my skills? So I'm telling my wife, like, I want to be able to do something that encapsulate like all the other talents and skills I've already developed in my 10 or so years of career. And so that's where my head's at. But at the same time, I shouldn't close myself off to other opportunities because just like you're saying, like, what does God want you to do?
Well, there's Dave Ramsey there, so you can check that out.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That'd be kind of a cool job.
They've got so many different opportunities, and you get to help people, and it also helps you.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's a ministry.
Yeah, I think maybe where I'm at is in the theoretics of it, which is, am I willing to do anything? Should I be willing to do anything? Or is there something very specific I'm supposed to do? Which kind of goes back to how do I know God's telling me to do this over that? Mm-hmm. So, we already kind of hit that. But
and there's nothing wrong. There's seasons of life where doing the pothole driving job is part of the deal. Yeah. Because actually I'm kind of jealous. That sounds like fun to me. Just because the way my life works, I'm like, I would solve all the world's problems in my head while I'm driving that dumb car. Because I'm like, that's a no-brainer job. So there's seasons where you're like, I'm glad that for 6 months, 18 months, 2 years. I drove
Yep.
around aimlessly. Because then actually what I ended up doing was starting some crazy company, and I had to know all the streets in Nashville. And by then I had memorized them from driving, hitting potholes every 5 yards.
That's right.
So there's seasons for that. Don't ever look down your nose on that. Like you said, whatever you do it wholeheartedly, and don't look down your nose at it.
Don't waste the
But
time.
I think probably what these guys have alluded to is sort of more like but there's the longer term in mind. You mentioned 5 years down the road, like. That would be the biggest difference, is that for a lot of people, they might get comfortable and they go, you know what, I get paid to drive this stupid car around, check the box, I'm done. And maybe the Lord's like, well, actually, I wanted you to think longer term. Maybe when you got little kids in the house, you're not going to want to spend 40 hours a day driving around, or 40 hours a week driving around, So he wants to get you ready for maybe something else. So there is such a thing as maybe lower level, entry level jobs. Don't snub. You mentioned flipping burgers at Checkers.
Yes.
And how
What a
that's
great-
part
what
of
a-
the development program,
Yep,
right?
great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Customer service,
So
customer
you
service,
and
customer
I
service.
wouldn't want to tell a young guy, hey, don't waste your time flipping burgers. It's like, well, there's flipping burgers and then there's flipping burgers.
Yep.
And so that could be your boot camp. We don't know.
True.
Well, and if you're driving around in a car for however many hours, the quality of time that you have with God, without any distractions, anything like that, podcasts, things that you're doing, God maybe just want, quality time with Him.
You might be writing like 10 worship songs a week. You're driving around. You're trying to write notes, or you're like taking notes on your phone. Like you're in Nashville, you get something produced.
I'm texting and driving, getting pulled over by a cop. I work for you guys.
Go hands free. Whatever app will let you go hands free on that.
That's right. It's true.
So true.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for
tonight.
having us.
I really, really enjoyed it.
Couple of good sages we got tonight.
That's right. Hey, I didn't mention it, but if you would go ahead, I think I'll talk to either one of you.
Yeah, that one's staring at you.
That's right. I think Paul is gonna just go back and forth. But please like and subscribe onto our channel if you like what you're saying. Even if you don't even like what we're saying, you should still like and subscribe. And then
Have you ever heard Nick Bargatze's joke about his daughter doing that same thing?
No.
Like she has like a pretend podcast, and she's like a little girl. And she doesn't know what it means, but she always wraps up her thing by, make sure you like and subscribe. it's like you say it and you're not even thinking about what you're saying. So,
Yeah. That's
but
true.
we really mean it.
yeah, we really
you
do.
You really should
We really
like and
do.
subscribe.
We're trying to get to 4 viewers.
Yeah, we're
Well,
trying
we get 4 viewers, we get invited back. So please. No, don't unsubscribe. Subscribe.
trying to break the 4 barrier.
That's
That's
Yes.
right.
That's a big
and
goal.
thank you again to Inklings, the
Inklings.
bookstore in Bartow. If you are in the Polk County area, or even if you're out of town and you're planning on coming into Lakeland or Bartow or the surrounding areas, you should check out Unfiltered, which is the coffee shop, and then Inklings, which nestled right on top.
You enter through Unfiltered, and then up here in this loft is a super cool environment.
And they're thinking about expanding, by the way.
Oh, wow. Very
Yeah,
cool.
so
Very cool. I mean,
The future's
and,
bright for Inklings.
GC, general contractor guy. I mean, look at this. Genuine exposed brick, genuine beams.
It's true.
This
It's
is a very
awesome.
cool
It's a
old
pretty
building.
amazing place,
I love what
yeah.
they've done
It
with
is.
it.
Yes.
Good vibe.
So again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Let's
It's been a
rock.
lot of fun.